The film opens with a team of research scientists, led by Phil and Gary, embarking on a weather modification experiment. Their plan involves deploying 2,000 unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, to create an artificial cloud and induce rainfall. Joanne oversees the project, while Damon is another researcher on the team. They release small UAVs from an aircraft to interact with a storm, initially achieving success and celebrating their progress. Meanwhile, in Oregon, former scientist turned science fiction author Charlie Prince is promoting his latest book with the assistance of Nora. Nora reminds Charlie of his upcoming studio session, which he reluctantly agrees to attend. As the scientists successfully create the cloud and rain begins to fall, an intense storm develops near the bookstore where Charlie is located. Charlie and Nora step outside to investigate and realize something is amiss. The storm wreaks havoc, causing a fatal car accident. Charlie and Nora narrowly escape a similar fate. On the outskirts of town, a young couple named Eric and Ashley are heading to meet Charlie for a university course and book signing. Eric notices an unusual weather pattern, but Ashley dismisses it, eager to reach the event. At the Federal Project Foundation Agency in West Virginia, Frank, the project's financier, is informed about the unexpected turn of events in Harrisford. A storm is brewing nearby, and Frank instructs his assistant to contact Damon. In town, Nora is hospitalized, and Charlie reunites with Joanne and Damon, who have rushed to the disaster scene. Charlie accuses Joanne of tampering with the weather, suspecting her research as the cause of the storms. After some persuasion, Joanne admits the truth. Given Charlie's background as a scientist, he offers his expertise to help rectify the situation. Joanne convinces a reluctant Damon to accept Charlie's help. Meanwhile, Gary informs Joanne about another storm cell forming near the test camp, prompting the trio to quickly drive to the location. Simultaneously, a farmer witnesses the approaching storm and attempts to flee, but succumbs to a freezing gust of wind that instantly kills him. Eric and Ashley arrive at the deserted bookstore, planning to meet Charlie at the TV studio for an interview. Eric convinces Ashley to view the situation as an adventure. At the farm, Charlie, Joanne, and Damon discover the aftermath of the freezing gust. They find one of the crashed UAVs and confront the scientists about it. The scientists admit it's part of their research, with 1999 more UAVs still out there, potentially creating more storm cells. Meanwhile, Nora calls Charlie to inform him that she is leaving town and reminds him of his TV appearance. The trio stumbles upon the body of a man who died due to the drastic drop in temperature caused by the storm. Joanne wants to halt the research program, horrified by the consequences, but Damon convinces her to continue. Meanwhile, Frank, the project's financier, contacts Damon and insists on continuing the experiment despite Joanne's decision, allowing the UAVs to keep flying. Elsewhere, Eric and Ashley are en route to the TV station. Eric notices another severe storm forming and manages to record it. However, he gets distracted by an approaching car driven by Nora, who is also distracted by the forming storm. They narrowly avoid a collision, but Nora loses control and crashes into a moving train, resulting in her immediate death. Back at the mobile camp, the trio arrives and introduces Charlie to the rest of the crew, Gary and Phil. Gary is familiar with Charlie's work as a science fiction author and is not particularly fond of him. Charlie, however, remains unfazed and focuses on the current situation. Eric and Ashley, who had a minor collision with a tree, are safe. They discuss their next move, and Eric suggests they broadcast the video they just recorded, thinking it could boost their resumes. At the camp, Charlie shares his observation of hearing a loud sonic boom before the storms hit. Damon suggests it could be thunder, but Charlie theorizes that the 2,000 UAVs in the sky could be creating the cloud and seeding them with silver iodide, causing the sudden temperature drop and the severe storms in various places, including Harrisford and Portland. Damon seems weary of Charlie's theories, but Joanne encourages him to listen and apply Charlie's solutions. During their conversation, Charlie reveals to Joanne that Frank hasn't grounded the UAVs, and they are still out there creating more storms. Frank's rationale is that he wants the UAVs to complete their cycle for the season. Joanne, angered by this, attempts to call Frank, but he ignores the call and it goes to voicemail. Meanwhile, Eric and Ashley, on their way to the station, experience a sudden drop in temperature that freezes them. Back at the camp, Joanne decides to ground the UAVs themselves and instructs Gary to do so. However, Gary informs her that they can't do it from there, as the kill commands are with Frank and the department head. She then suggests they could try to alter what the UAVs are doing up there. She proposes reversing the ionization process so the UAVs won't absorb any more moisture and will simply redistribute it instead of processing it. Gary warns her that they've never done that before, but she insists it's the only solution. solution. Shortly after, while Gary is trying to implement Joanne's theory, he notices another storm cell forming right at the camp. Meanwhile, Charlie notices the severe storms and urges everyone to evacuate quickly. While Gary is gathering their laptops, Phil rushes to start the car, but is swept away by the storm into its center, shocked to see Phil die in front of them. Meanwhile, Damon and Phil get into a car and drive away. Charlie and Joanne find a small tunnel under a cliff and crawl inside. They stay there, holding each other as the storm passes by, leaving them unharmed. In another location, Frank is updated about the chaos at the camp. He orders a helicopter to fly over the area and provide an update on the situation. After his assistant leaves, Frank makes a call to an unidentified unit. Once the storm has passed, Charlie and Joanne begin to walk on foot to find transportation. Meanwhile, Damon and Gary arrive at the location where Phil was last seen. They sadly inform the others that Phil didn't survive, leaving Gary mourning his friend. The two then get in the car and Damon drives off. They come across a hotel on their way that has free Wi-Fi. They decide to stay there for a while and use the Wi-Fi. However, when they enter, they find the place deserted and the power out. Charlie and Joanne find a generator in the basement and set it up. It works for a while, and Gary attempts to reverse the ionization process to hopefully stop the ice storm. Meanwhile, Joanne writes an email to Frank insisting that the UAVs must be immediately grounded and that he is responsible for reporting to the Senate. Frank receives the email immediately and orders a check on the plane's location. Back at the hotel, Gary is doing his best to hack into the system and ground the UAVs, but before he can complete the task, the generator runs out of gas and the power goes out, cutting off their internet connection. Shortly after, the group goes to the basement looking for more gas, and Charlie's phone reminds him of his TV station interview. He suggests they could use the TV station as it will definitely have a power source and Wi-Fi. Elsewhere, Ashley and Eric have arrived at the TV station, broadcast the footage they have taken of the storms. However, when they find the place deserted, Eric breaks in and enters the studio. They quickly trim and edit the footage, and Ashley prepares to present it to the global audience. On their way to the TV station, the scientists come across the train that crashed into Nora's car. They are devastated to discover the horror their experiment has caused, and Charlie hasn't even discovered Nora's body yet. He shouts and calls out if there is anyone out there, but there is no response. They soon come across Nora's dead body, and Charlie sheds a tear for her. Joanne blames herself for all the lives lost because of her research. She also berates Damon for letting Frank take control, but he tells her no one else would have funded it. She labels herself and Damon as murderers. She then goes to Charlie and joins him in the car. She sympathizes with him for Nora and confesses how difficult everything has been since she joined the scientific research journey. She thought she could handle it, but the bureaucracy and politics are much more complex than she thought. Soon their conversation is interrupted by the formation of another heavy storm next to them, and Charlie calls out everyone to the car. Gary and Damon rush to him, and together they drive off to the TV station. The ice storm chases after them, freezing everything it touches, but they manage to escape it successfully. Elsewhere, Frank is informing his superiors about the current situation with the UAVs. Back at the station, before Eric and Ashley are able to broadcast, the scientists arrive and knock on the studio's door. Initially hesitant, Eric opens the door for them and is surprised to see author Charlie. He calls Ashley to come and see, and she is also surprised and confesses they were initially there to meet him. She also informs him about their assignment they were given. However, Charlie insists that there is a more pressing issue at hand and updates them on the current formation of the storm cell. They understand the gravity of the situation and express their willingness to help. They inform the group about the footage they were about to broadcast. Meanwhile, Frank calls Joanne directly and asks for an update on the storm cell formation. However, Joanne, still upset with him for taking her research, informs him about the new storm cell forming in Portland and Seattle in 2 hours. Frank then informs her that the research is terminated and over and offers his apologies. He then makes a call and orders the termination of the UAVs, which are promptly destroyed. Frank shortly dismisses Joanne and shreds her research paper. At the station, Charlie theorizes that Frank could be hiding something. He believes that Frank didn't do this out of a safety measure, but wanted to see how severe the storms could get. Suddenly, Gary is alerted that a large and heavy storm is already forming in Portland, Oregon. Shortly after, Frank calls again to ask why there is still momentum in the storm cells, as the UAVs have been destroyed. The scientists inform him that the only solution to stop this disaster is to heat up the upper atmosphere ozone with some energy and cut off the power source completely. Frank asks Joanne if if it's practical, and she says they could try if only they have the satellite code to enter the system. Initially hesitant, Frank agrees to send Gary the codes. The group then decides to go to the university as it has a high-altitude array. Eric and Ashley are allowed to broadcast their footage for the public, while Charlie and Joanne head to the university. On their way, they see the large storm circling out in the field, causing damage to the environment. They somehow had to pass through it, and Charlie drives right through the ice storm while Joanne is in stress. He managed to pass successfully through the heavy storm, and they finally arrived at the university. Back at Gary, he has received the satellite access codes from Frank, and he is logging in to initiate the process. At the university in the south of Portland, the group rushes inside, but when Damon tries to get out of the car, the ice storms catch up on him and freeze him to death. Joanne sadly leaves him for her own safety. Shortly, they are met with a woman scientist, and they tell her their plan. They need to use this facility to punch a momentary hole in the ozone so they can use the satellites to hear the messages there so that they can extinguish these storms to save the people of Portland. She shows them to the control room, and from there, she assists them in powering up the array. Shortly, they power up the arrays and hope Gary has got the access codes. Meanwhile, Gary is initiating the satellite orbit. Meanwhile, the place is going mad with the heavy storms, and it's destroying the cities. The power source in the facility is running out due to the storm, and the ice is entering the facility. Charlie notices this and tries to rush the process. To their luck, they did it successfully, and the arrays are powered up. The energy generated from that then reaches the cell tower and eventually powers it to the higher atmosphere of ozone. Gary is alerted of the ozone breach detection, and he immediately does his part and fires an energy from the satellite directly to the beam. After a few minutes, the theory is proved practical, and they have successfully dispersed the heavy ice storm cells. The team celebrates after completion, and Joanne takes herself in the arms of Charlie. The movie comes to a close as we see Charlie and Joanne a few days later. They are now dating, and Eric and Ashley arrive to finally do the interview with the author. Back at Frank's office, he receives a CD of Charlie's interview. He initially shows no interest in it, but his assistant assures him that he might want to see it as a copy has already been sent to the Senate Investigation Committee. It turns out that the CD contains evidence of Frank's betrayal. The CD was sent by Damon, Joanne, and Charlie with a note saying, "Good luck in prison." This revelation marks a turning point in the narrative, highlighting the consequences of Frank's actions. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.